What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word. If you haven't heard, I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. This is Atlanta Falcons podcast for the FanSided Network Insight Blog and Dirty. Be sure to give this thing a 5-star review, like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on anywhere there's podcasts. So it really helps the show grow. Again, I'm John Buhler. Cover predominantly college sports here for FanSided, but I'm a diehard and tortured Atlanta Falcons fan. Appreciate everybody out there subscribing to the channel here. We're over 366, so that's really exciting. One for each day in the leap year. Let's get to 420 before 20. I mean, at that point, like, I'm going to be coming back from Germany. Again, I'll keep you guys posted as this thing goes on because, like, we're still going to do it once a week on Wednesdays for about half an hour or so. And then, I'll probably be taking some time off with my fiance to go travel abroad. We'll be back here in time for the NFL draft. But this is a good time of the year, the off season. This is kind of where I thrive. This is where the creative juices are flowing here. So, without further ado, let's get started here with our first run of the day. I'm really digging what Ian Cunningham's about in free agency. I think he's going about it the right way. Look, it's a breath of fresh air to have a general manager who thinks counter to what we've seen the two previous regimes under Terry Fontenot for 5 years, and then Thomas Dimitroff for 12. So it's been almost 2 decades since we've had a general manager think differently. And even though the Falcons had success under Thomas Dimitroff's run, in the wake of Rich McKay, before that all went to hell, we've kind of done stuff wrong. We've done a lot of things wrong over the last few years, particularly from a financial, front office, and coaching standpoint. So I will always sit back and I will think about what Ian Cunningham said at the NFL Scouting Combine. He's like, look, this is going to be the last year that we only have 5 picks. Like, these are premium assets. You can't just throw them away all willy-nilly like we've done before, because you only get so many, bites of the apple. Yes, Fontenot saved his best draft for last, but, obviously James Pierce Jr.'s legal situation's frightening. Xavier Watts has been fantastic. Jalen Walker's a team leader. We don't know what Jack Nelson's going to be anything. And then obviously Billy Bowman Jr. is kind of banged up. So we'll see what happens here. But thank God for Watts. See, that's what happens when you only have 5 picks as opposed to 7. If you have 7 or more, you got to figure out, you could take more chances, I think. Look, there are some guys that you don't have roster spots available for all these guys coming out of the draft. So I understand, moving it around, but having a little bit more flexibility and not being in such dire straits. He's also doing it the right way with free agency. And this is really, really, really important. Not to say that the Falcons have done it wrong there in free agency as much as they've probably done it wrong in the draft, where, like, in the past, they would always trade up to go get a guy as opposed to move back, gain more capital, get a little more flexibility. Thomas Dimitroff made his career on being able to trade up to go get Julio Jones. So, he has the right to say that works. But, there's also the Takk McKinleys of the world. And, there's other situations out there where you make a few boneheaded picks. I think the Falcons in years past have put such a great emphasis on the first-round pick, they kind of mess up on their second and thirds. That's where you get starters. That's where you get Pro Bowlers. That's where you get championship rosters. That's where you get depth. And I think that's kind of what they're doing here in free agency that has me so excited. Look, a lot of these moves have been very low-key under the radar. Obviously, bringing Tua Tagovailoa here after getting released from the Dolphins for pennies on the dollar, that's always going to be high profile because he's a quarterback. He's a star in this league, former college star, what have you. But they're not out there giving premium money to good players that the other teams don't want. That's what losing organizations do. And even though there's probably about one or so big gargantuan signings in free agency that pan out, there are a lot of Kirk Cousins ones. There's a lot of even if you get a great player in his prime, like Ndamukong Suh going from the Lions to the Dolphins, I mean, he didn't win diddly poo there with the Dolphins. He wants some more stuff later on with the Rams and Buccaneers. But honestly, too mercurial of a player to really achieve all that he could have potentially on the football field. One of the greatest defensive players in college football history, really good in the NFL. And we'll just leave it at that. But when you're you're adding players to your team, like to complement as opposed to like supplement, like that's a big key because it means that you like the pieces you have in your building. Look, I think the Falcons have good financials. I think that they have good cap space and everything like that. Maybe a big move's coming later on down the line, but a lot of these ones have kind of been like 1 year prove it deals. And I think that that was what Terry Fontenot did in year one, with Arthur Smith back in 2020, 2021, excuse me, where the Falcons were in such disarray financially because of Dimitroff. Like they had to kind of get going. And they had some good hits there. Obviously Cordero Patterson is probably the biggest one of the bunch. Lorenzo Carter kind of got the most out of his talent here before he rapidly decayed. But you're going out there, you're getting guys like Samson Ekibon, Aziz Ojolari, bringing back Malamide Zaccheaus, Austin Hooper, Nick Folk, Jake Bailey, players like that. Tua Tagovailoa as well. That all it all feeds into the narrative of like, we got to turn this roster over a little bit, but I think we have, with a lot of 1 year players, you got to reshuffle a deck a little bit quicker. Look, every NFL team cycles through a third of their roster every year because that's how it's built. You can't afford to pay everybody. The pie is growing, but not at the rate that it needs to bring everybody here. The NFLPA has the worst leadership of any players association out there, and they're not super excited for having J.C. Treader back. I tell you that much. Noticing that from afar. But Cunningham's going about this as I've seen the Bears build a team. I've seen how the Ravens have built teams. I've seen how the Eagles have built teams. And what they've done in recent years, maybe the Bears more last year than anything, because what have they really been before that? The 85 team and a bunch of George Halas nonsense. Again, that I'm 36. I didn't see any of that. But obviously the Eagles and the Ravens are, well-run organizations. There's a lot to be learned from that. Don't think you're above that. Don't think you're, I know everything I know because the Saints won a lot or the Patriots won a lot. Now get out of town with that. You can learn from the best. You don't have to learn from just one team. Learn from several. Grow that way. And I don't know. I just kind of feel like this is kind of more in line with what I would do. And again, like I'm not the best at this. I mean, like I write opinions about sports. Like I'm not diving deep into analytics. I don't really know all the positions like the back of my hand, what each one of them does, what their responsibilities are, scheme fit and everything like that. It's above my pay grade. But I will say though, like from like a methodology standpoint, I can get behind this a lot more than like we're going to push all of our chips into the table, like it's a game of poker and then you crap out or whatever. Like this is a lot more. This is a lot more concise. This is a lot more in line with what I would want to do. And again, as long as Ian Cunningham, Matt Ryan, and Kevin Stefanski maintain a tight partnership with the support of Arthur and Josh Blank, then I think we'll be okay. So on that note, let's move on to our second round of the day here. AJ Terrell and Jake Matthews have agreed to restructurings of their contracts. I think that's good for the team. And again, I'm not going to get into the financials of all that. Like, I don't know, like what is a contract? Like if I was reporting it, that's important. And that's really the only numbers I care about. But this is kind of more of along the lines of like, what does this really mean for the franchise? What does this mean? What are they trying to set the tone here? Terrell and Matthews have been with this team for a long time. Both first-round picks. Jake Matthews in 14 out of Texas A&M. He played for Mike Smith. He's played for Arthur Smith, and he's played for Dan Quinn and Terry Fontenot. He's played for everybody. Terry Fontenot. He's been around, man. He's been here forever, dude. AJ Terrell's been here since 2020. I think he was like the last, maybe the last or second to last first-round pick that Dimitroff made. Dimitroff drafted both these guys. And even though I think they only have a pair of Pro Bowls between the two of them, I think people respect them and know what they're about across the league. I think if they played for another franchise, they'd probably get higher accolades. But I think anybody who knows football knows these two guys are just solid. Just plug and play. Don't have to worry about them. They're not super flashy, but they're guys that I think everybody in the NFL would want to have on their team. Not just because of like what they could do on the football field, but what they do off the field. Just overall really good dudes. Come from football families too. Obviously, Jake Matthews is a Matthews. His dad, Bruce Matthews, is like the greatest offensive lineman in Oilers Titans history. His uncle Clay started for the Browns and Falcons. His cousin Clay III started for the Packers. And AJ Terrell's younger brother, Avion's going to be a first round pick out of Clemson, probably in the 20s or something like that. So we'll touch on that here. It's look, I don't think the Falcons are in the worst situation with the cap, but this frees up some money. And I think what this does is this kicks it out a little bit further. Like, look, I don't think Jake Matthews is going to play for anybody else. And I don't think AJ Terrell wants to either. I think these are guys that are going to be for the franchise for the duration. Matthews could play here for 15 years. Terrell could play here for 10, give or take. Also AJ Terrell's from College Park. Grew up to play at Clemson. Like, this is a big deal for him. And it kind of goes back to that thing where, like, he says, "Oh, about time," with the uniforms before the reveal. Like, what AJ Terrell says, even though he's quiet, like, matters. It carries, it carries weight here. People respect the hell out of him, and I think that's a big deal. Both of these guys agreeing to restructures, what I think it does is it frees up more capital to potentially keep some of the offensive core here. You got to figure out a Drake London extension here. You got to figure out if Kyle Pitts is going to be here for year 7. You got to figure out, you got to pay Bijan Robinson. And then you got to figure out what's going on with the quarterback room. I think that, more likely than not going to give Michael Penix Jr. the 5th-year option. Maybe they will. But again, we'll touch on that here a little bit later on in the show. But, like, that's where your bread's buttered. You also got to figure out, Chris Lindstrom, you want him to be here for the duration? How about Jesse Bates III? He's probably getting up there with where his contract stands, coming over from the Bengals. There's other players out there too. You got to figure out Xavier Watts. You got to figure out a bunch of other players on this team. Brandon Dorless. Again, it's a new regime here, so we'll see. Like, do the pieces fit? Do the pieces line up? Because again, guys that had success there playing for Raheem Morris, that may not necessarily guarantee success here. Again, everybody in the NFL is the best players at what they do, but, like, it's so good, it's so close. Some guys are, not as many people are coaching independent as you'd think. And even guys that have been great for a long time, like AJ Terrell and Jake Matthews, like, they haven't really won a lot here. Frankly, nobody has. But I will say, though, spreading the money out a little bit more just kind of shows that they're goodwill ambassadors for what they're going to do here. Even though I would say Matthews is towards the end of his career and Terrell's arguably still in his prime, we'll see what happens. But this is how you basically keep Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and the likes of that happy. I would be in favor of this. Again, maybe you can go out there and you can sign somebody else who's still available. Again, I'm mostly operating in the college space right now, and I'm not wasting too much time thinking about, someone's retread out there in free agency. But, like, the right pieces could be had. You could do some extensions. You could figure out some things here with what you want to do. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. And I think that's really the driving force here with the new regime under Matt Ryan, Kevin Stefanski, and Ian Cunningham. They don't want to be locked into anything too terribly long, but the guys that they want here, they want them to be here for the duration. More importantly, Matt Ryan has a relationship with AJ Terrell and Jake Matthews. I think that matters considerably. And on that note, let's move on to our third down with some pass. This ain't great, man. Elijah Wilkinson, what are you doing, man? You burned a bridge like you're Lane Kiffin. Like, Lane Kiffin wishes he could do this. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee because this is where we're gonna put the timestamp or the mid ad, I guess. Got to say something here because this is so wild. Sometimes, man, like, being a Falcons fan and following along with it, like, we put up with the most nonsense of any team in the NFL. Like, no, who else deals with this? Like, Elijah Wilkinson, who was a third stringer at tackle entering the year, ended up being the starting right tackle because Caleb McGarry, who got an extension, got hurt during practice and didn't play at all during the season. So even though I thought, like, I gave Elijah Wilkinson credit for kind of going out there and just trying to keep this offensive line afloat, he had a lot of false start penalties, and he inadvertently allowed a play that cost Michael Penix Jr. his season. He tore his ACL. Again, you can't put that all on him, but, like, that's what people are going to say. So he leaves in free agency, and he goes and he signs with the Cardinals. He was talking with fans or whatever over social media, saying a bunch of disparaging comments about the Falcons. And you know what? You can say that. You can say that about any team you work for. You don't have to love every place you've ever worked. This isn't, or every person. This isn't some utopia, guys. But you got to have a little bit more self-awareness, because if you're talking that disparagingly, It's going to come to light. And also, it's not like he's going from like the worst franchise in the league to the best. I mean, he's going to the Cardinals, man. Like, if you look at the bottom half of the NFC, like we're there, dude. I mean, they made the playoffs more recently than us, but like that's not our super well run organization. They're one of 12 teams that hasn't won a Super Bowl to date. They've been to one, we've been to two, and they're on three combined in that regard. Again, I'm a little bit trying to develop my thoughts and feelings around the league here, of who's going to be good and who's going to be bad and who's going to be ugly. I don't think this is going to be a good year for the Cardinals, mostly because I think that it's an arms race out there in the NFC West between San Francisco, LA, and Seattle. Like Seattle won the Super Bowl, and even then they let Kenneth Walker the third go to the Chiefs. Like, what are we doing? That's so dumb. That's unbelievable. That's such a soul crushing blow. He's so good. The 49ers are like, they got to win now, because if not, they got to move on from Kyle Shanahan. Like at this point, like what are we doing? Like just figure it out. But then again, he's not going to figure it out because he's afraid of the big moments. And then obviously LA, you've still got Matthew Stafford, you still got Sean McVay, you still got Puka Nacua and everything like that. But they're not getting any younger. They got to figure this out there. So Arizona's going to be coming up a distant fourth. And again, maybe I'm viewing this with rose-colored glasses here in the NFC South, but like, look, I think there's a chance that like, I don't think the Saints are going to win the division, and I don't know if it could be anywhere. Like the Falcons could finish in first, second, third, or fourth. That wouldn't shock me. I'd be a little surprised if Tampa finished in last. Probably that's what I would be leaning there. But the margin for error amongst this division's inconsequential. Like it could go any number of ways. I think we have a talented roster. I think we have a quarterback situation. I think there's other things to be had here. New head coach, but Stefanski's had coaching chops as well from his time in Cleveland. I definitively look at Arizona. I'm like, they're going to finish in last place in the NFC West. That's just kind of how it goes, particularly if they're going to roll with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. And even though, Mike LaFleur is taking over at head coach from the 49ers staff and everything like that, he's the second best LaFleur head coach behind his brother Matt in Green Bay. It's going to be challenging there. But like, I'm sitting here thinking about this with Wilkinson. Like, we've had other stuff like this. We've had, had the Jeff George era of nonsense. We've had Julio Jones break up with the Falcons on Undisputed with Shannon Sharp. Like, just embarrassing crap like that. Why is it always us? Why do we subject ourselves to get harpooned like a 19th century New England whale? Like, is our blubber that good? Is it that damn delicious? Like, are you kidding me? Look, I don't think the karmic implications of this are going to go very well. If he does get hurt, I will say that half of Dirty Bird Nation on Twitter is going to crucify him. They're going to wish him nothing but the worst. Look, you can't be in the league as a player or a coach or a front office executive and say stuff like that. Because if and when you do, like, there's only so many jobs out there, man. Like, he's in his 30s. He's not going to be doing this forever. This may be his last opportunity to get kind of big money, and maybe he wanted to stay here and it just didn't work out. But you have to also have the self-awareness here. There's a new regime here. This isn't Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot. This is Matt Ryan, Kevin Stefanski, and Ian Cunningham. This is a different thing. So anytime there's any sort of wholesale changes in the NFL, mind you that, there's 32 franchises, at least 8 every season fire their head coach. So there's going to be some level of tumult across the league. Again, half the league is undrafted. You've got a whole mess of like players coming in from the NFL draft. You got new general managers, contracts come up. Every team is a different feel to it. It's about trying to sustain and maintain culture. And if he's not going to be good for this culture, then move on. But like, it's comical. Like, are you really going to say this stuff, dude? Because, like, look, you can say that about all you want. If he feels that way, that's fine. He's entitled to his opinion. Honestly, the Falcons probably deserve a few errors here. They've made a lot of errors in the last decade or so. It's been frustrating as hell. I've been a full-time employee here with FanSided for over 8 years now. We haven't sniffed the playoffs since. It's been unbelievable. But you got to be smarter than this, because Like, where do you fall on the roster? You're not a top 25 most important player. You maybe you start, maybe you're like the 40th guy. Like, you don't want players like that bringing extra noise with them when the margin for error between win and defeat here is so razor thin, particularly at a situation like Arizona where every win, every game is going to be a challenge because you're at a deficiency in a lot of areas. It's just unfortunate, but at that point, let's move on. Let's move on to our punt here. Let's get out of here with this. The great Michael Penix Jr. and Tua Tagovailoa debate is upon us, folks. This is going to be the driving force of our offseason conversation. And I'm going to touch on this until I'm blue in the face. It's going to get old, but you know what? Y'all probably want to hear it. Y'all are interested in this. I don't necessarily know how it's going to shake out. Again, I'm trying to come around more on the idea of Tua Tagovailoa being part of this team. I didn't want him here. I don't think he's a good leader. I don't think he's smart. I think he's injury prone. I think he's one concussion away from something really frightening. Why do we need this in our building? And again, I understand from a financial perspective, a 1-year vet minimum prove-it deal where the Dolphins are eating a bunch of your cap, eating all the contract. This is more in line with maybe what the Falcons want to do. Spend a lot of money elsewhere. But then they got to free it up. I don't know where it's going to go. But we'll see. But anyway, Matt Chernoff, who I really think has a lot of good points there for 680 The Fan, mentioned something on the radio waves earlier this week. He believes that the Falcons brass has told Tua privately, or at least his representation, that like you're going to be the starter out of camp, at least for the first 4 weeks, because Penix is still got to work his way back from like a third ACL tear that suffered versus the Panthers game that happened midway through the season. And look, I am of the belief that between these two, I think the ceiling is higher with Penix. I think Penix is a leader. I think the guys on the team like him. I think the guys on the team want to win for him. And I don't necessarily know if that's the reason Stefanski took this job. I think he just liked Matt Ryan and Arthur Blank and everything like that and wants to build something here. Also, anything is better than Cleveland. But then again, Myles Garrett wasn't sad to see him go, and he's a phenomenal player. I also learned the other day that he's dating Chloe Kim. Didn't know that. That's apparently they share the same trainers and everything like that. It's wild. Isn't love great? But anyhow, Chernoff said I think Tua is going to start the first 4 games or so this season, and then Penix is going to work his way back. I think that they're being non-committal to this because I think they also want to make sure that Penix takes his rehab seriously because, the sooner he gets back, the more of it being a competition. In theory, I think it does make the roster better. I think, I know and sometimes you say when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't really have one, but I would say we've kind of been in that boat, since the end of Matt Ryan's prime. It's been challenging. This is why we haven't made the playoffs in a while. It's been one terrible defense after another. Last year's was good. Now we're dealing with quarterback disarray. It's not great. But the debate's upon us. Look, I think in the best case scenario, one of 2 things needs to happen. Either it becomes apparent that neither Tua or Penix are the guy, or Penix emerges, because I think you can build with that. If you've got clear and decisive evidence that neither of these guys are who you want to roll with moving forward, then you have every right to go get a quarterback in the draft next year. There's going to be a lot of guys coming in 2027 that are of intrigue. Look, I know guys like Arch Manning and Dante Moore are probably at or top of the board. You've got other people out there like CJ Carr, Sam Levitt, Julian Sand. Maybe Lenore Sellers puts it all together again. There's other quarterbacks out there that are missing. Maybe John Mateer figures it out. Again, we thought this was going to be a loaded quarterback draft class this year. And it's Fernando Mendoza, maybe Ty Simpson. Then after that, you're looking at Carson Beck or Garrett Nussmeier, and it ain't great. But you have a better chance at finding a guy in 27 than you do in 26. Frankly, you have too much money tied up and too much uncertainty at this point where you got to know. Because I think the sooner you know, the sooner you can plan. I think that's what General Schwarzkopf used to say. If the sooner we figure something out, the sooner we can counter. But until we know, we're just waiting in the wind here. We're wasting time. And time is a precious commodity. And if Penix works and it's a good for us, then we can move forward with that. And obviously, he may have to get a contract extension in that regard. It probably won't be top of the market given his injury history, and that'll be a whole other saga. Many shows from now on down the line, it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. I can't wait to talk about this all off season with you guys. And on that note, this was episode, I believe, 85 of the Blog and Nerdy podcast. Yes, you can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter at X at Buhler118. You can follow along with the show on YouTube at Blog and Dirty FS. You can follow along on X at Blog and Dirty. Be sure to like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give this thing a 5-star review. It really helps the show grow. Again, a little bit of housekeeping stuff here. I'm going to look at the schedule real quick to make sure I got this absolutely right here. So today is Wednesday, March 18th. I will be doing shows the 25th, the 1st, and the 8th. So, and then there's not going to be one on tax day, the 15th, because I will be in Germany, but I promise to do one on the 22nd, Earth Day. That's what the calendar says ahead of the draft here. So I'll probably touch a little bit more on the draft stuff here in a little while here. But again, it's challenging because we don't have a first round pick. So the allure and the intrigue of the draft just isn't there for me. Probably isn't for you. Thankfully, we have like a new regime, new head coach, new general manager, a lot of new stuff here. So people like to talk about news, exciting. And again, I just want to see this team make the playoffs at some point before I die. That's so mean. But we want a Super Bowl before I die, make the playoffs here soon. That's what we need. Once again, thanks for listening. And this is the Blog and Nerdy podcast.